Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Victoria Matthew. I'm a Senior Program Officer at VentureWell, and I am thrilled to be here with you for this fabulous panel today called Screw Ideas, Nail Process, and Shape Emergence. And it's a foundation session, and the foundation sessions are designed to give you kind of like a really good, solid foundation for starting to teach innovation and entrepreneurship and integrate innovation entrepreneurship. However, I want to underscore that that does not mean this is any kind of like dumbed down session or anything like that. It's actually going to be a pretty sophisticated session that's really going to call into question how we traditionally teach innovation entrepreneurship. And trust me, I love Post-its as much as anyone. I love a good brainstorming session. I love ideation. But what the group today is really going to be talking about is how that's really flawed when we're really hoping to drive students towards impact. So for those of you that are visual learners, I'm a big visual learner myself. I had the pleasure of working with our great panelists on actually designing a visual manifesto that you can download, which I believe Sarah is going to pop into the chat for you. So if you want to follow along, we'll be talking through a number of the points that are actually in that manifesto, and then you can also refer to it later. Additionally, our fabulous designer, Max, has also designed a rather nifty kind of punk rock looking shirt with the header from the manifesto. So if you're so inclined, please head to our swag shop and feel free to grab a copy of that. So before we get started, what I want to do is thank our sponsors. Whoops, there is the manifesto. Beautiful, right? You can see the punk rock logo right there. So I want to thank our sponsors without whom this wouldn't be possible. So yeah, big shout out to all of our sponsors. I think you've probably seen this slide a few times by now. And then I also want to encourage you to check out our schedule. We've got a whole host of other great sessions that are coming up today and tomorrow. So definitely click on the schedule tab. And what is a foundation session? Okay, so essentially what we're looking at is a 60-minute session. We've gathered up a wonderful group of experienced INE educators, longtime VentureWell members, open attendees, to share all that they know. It's going to be a live panel format. I've prepared a whole bunch of questions to hopefully get in and underneath what we mean when we say screw ideas. But we also invite you throughout to post your questions to the chat, and we will come to those. If we do run out of time, not to worry, because in addition to that 60 minutes, we also have 15 minutes of hallway conversations. So you can stay on after the session officially ends, continue to exchange ideas with each other, with the presenters, as well as contact information. And then should you require closed captioning, please click on the closed caption button in the toolbar. And so I think that is it for now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, voila. Okay, and what I want to do is hand it over now to our panelists to just do a quick 60-second introduction, who you are, your institution, the classes and programs that you teach. And so I would love to start out with Soyoung.
Hi, everybody. My name is Soyoung. I'm over here in Seattle, Washington at the University of Washington. I am a teaching professor in the mechanical engineering department, and I teach a program called Engineering, Innovation, and Health, where we bring engineering students from different disciplines together with doctors, nurses, various healthcare professionals to design and innovate different solutions to unmet needs in health.
Sweet. Thank you, Soyoung. And then I'm going to pass it on to Luz.
Hello, my name is Luz Zapata Ramos. I am at the University of Puerto Rico-Mayaguez campus, and along with Dr. Jose Lugo, we run the New Venture Design Experience, where we run 2 courses in engineering and business administration together simultaneously along the semester, so that students can interact, have an interdisciplinary experience, and solve problems together. I'm also part of a large network of INE on our campus and along the island. So all of the students that participate in our programs, I also encourage to participate in other programs that I'm also a part of, such as the NSFI group site and incubators, accelerators, etc.
Awesome. Thank you, Luz. And then I'm going to pass it to your colleague, Jose.
Hi, my name is Jose Lugo, associate professor at the University of Puerto Rico at Mayaguez, along with Dr. Zapata. We run the New Venture Design Experience. As she explained, we bring engineers and business students and many other disciplines together so they can fight on how to innovate. But on the more serious note, so we co-teach so they can see the process of design thinking from different point of views and consumer behavior and product design. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jose. Khanjan?
Hey folks, Khanjan Mehta from Lehigh University. I serve as the Vice Provost for Creative Inquiry and Director of the Montup Initiative. And I'm the prime instigator, the prime troublemaker for a bunch of different programs where we have students, faculty, external partners, dolphins and whales all come together and create new stuff. So we are essentially, it's about integrating learning, research, and entrepreneurial engagement. I'm interested in moonshots. I'm interested in applied research and deep insight-based innovations that improve the human condition. And I haven't figured out how to get that done in a semester. So pretty much all the projects that I work on are multi-year projects with one team passing the baton on to the next. And so that's a different model that's going to kind of become apparent why that matters through the conversation today. And so I have a portfolio of about 40 projects, about 350 students working on these multi-year projects.
Sweet. Thank you, Khanjan. And next up, Jason, you will have met Jason yesterday morning. So if you came to the kickoff, Jason.
Jason Frasca, Montclair State University, full-time faculty through the Feliciano Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, also co-director of our Innovation Research Lab, Mix Lab, professor of marketing, entrepreneurship, innovation, design curriculum for all of our entrepreneurship programs alongside international innovation entrepreneurship programs, exchanges. And through the center, we focus deeply on marrying community for our students, the community at large, to helping them all with their entrepreneurial endeavors and innovative projects.
Sweet, thank you. And Jason's co-conspirator, Iain, who you probably also saw yesterday.
Hey everyone, it's great to see everyone out there. I'm Iain Kerr. I'm also a professor at Montclair State University. All the similar things to what Jason was saying, so I won't repeat them. My background and my real interests are in how we collectively design futures worth having. I've worked a lot with communities all over the world on ecological type issues. And I have a background in architecture and philosophy.
Great, thank you. So you can see why I'm excited about this session. Fabulous group of faculty joining us today. And to kick us off, I actually would love Iain to kind of describe the genesis of this, like what inspired this session?
Yeah, you know, Jason and I were talking about what we really love about open. And the thing that came up was this one lunchtime session we went to where a student had gotten a grant. They'd done a project during a semester and they got this grant to make it real in the world. They went out into the world and they immediately realized what they had ideated, what they had, you know, pitched in their entrepreneurship class had no actual relation to reality. And they had to throw it all out and just start over again by engaging with the world, engaging with people, and co-developing a way of working that would lead to, you know, larger transformations that where you couldn't just point like, this is the original idea, this is the something, it followed this linear path. And so we thought we should have a session called Fuck Ideas. And so we sent that off to VentureWell and they were like, this is really exciting and interesting, but maybe we just call it Screw Ideas and get some really smart people to join you guys. And that was the kickoff of this whole thing.
Not that you are not really smart people, Iain and Jason, just to be clear. And yes, the title did raise some eyebrows, which I think was the intent, right? I think it's fair to say that. So one of the first things when we were meeting as a group and we were putting together this manifesto, the idea that came up first that you'll see if you've downloaded it is learn from the world. And Soyoung, I wonder if you could share why this is important for you, given your work and the specific students that you work with.
Sure. So As I had mentioned before, in my program, Engineering, Innovation, and Health, our engineering students are working very closely with healthcare professionals to solve different problems in health. And like Iain had said, having students building in their room, coming up with a solution just in a classroom environment is very limiting and may not have any real world impact. And so it's really important for our students not just to hear from doctors about their problem and then sit in a classroom and just, go to the whiteboard with sticky notes and come up with a solution. It's really important for the students to actually get out on site to the clinics, to talk to different RNs, the PAs, the nurses, the doctors, doing clinical observations and shadowing, potentially even speaking with patients, just learning from the world. It's really important. And so this unique opportunity of actually getting out on site and putting these newly acquired engineering skills to practice and solving open-ended problems can really lead to impactful innovations. And this is, again, all made possible by getting the students out of the classroom, out of the lab environment, and potentially even off campus.
That's great. Thank you, Soyoung. And Khanjan, you referenced your work a little bit, but I wonder if you could dig into this topic a little bit more, based on this kind of, the kind of work that you do with your students across multiple years.
Sure. I think Soyoung captured it, right? We are all about working on open-ended problems. And so students and even faculty have just not spent enough time in the world. So when I look at my portfolio, almost none of the projects started with, I have an idea. So for example, I have a team that's working on a 2-cent test strip to screen women for UTIs, urinary tract infections, and preeclampsia in Sierra Leone. Like, what student is going to wake up one fine day and say, well, that's an opportunity and we can save lives if we just pay more attention to urinary tract infections, right? It just doesn't happen. And so, of course, we talk to lots of students. They come with ideas, and we ask them to do a 5-minute Google test, and they invariably fail that 5-minute Google test. And so we say, how about this? Instead of thinking about ideas, why don't we start with a dream? Like, I have a dream. We have a dream. No mother should die while giving life. Now, that's an admirable dream, and that's something we are willing to support you on. And so we say, let's put some parameters on it and let's take a deep dive. Like, let's not just leave the building just yet and talk to people. Let's go look at the literature, because there is so much literature out there and students don't read enough. So let's look at the literature. Let's talk to people, experts and non-experts. Let's understand who the stakeholders are. Like, how do people live their lives? What kind of decisions do they make? What kind of choices do they face? Let's live it. Let's experience it. Let's synthesize that knowledge and publish it, right? So they might spend a semester just exploring, just understanding and ecosystem mapping, identifying potential partners and potential pathways to impact, that if we did design something of this sort, here are ways in which we can get it out to the people. Because often that product is a very small part of that larger system that they need to build or design to actually have that long-term impact, right? So it's about what can they design and what resources do they have and what can they leverage? What does a higher sustainable equilibrium look like and how do we get there? So in essence, the student that started with this construct of I have an idea is going to come back and tell you, wait a minute, I had no idea. And I think that's a good starting point that's a good trajectory for getting to something truly remarkable and truly meaningful and impactful.
Thank you. I love that, starting out with I have no idea. We should have put that in the manifesto, I'm thinking now, So Mariluz, I know this is something you think about in your program with Jose as well. And I wonder if you could talk about, how you conceptualize that and how you implement that.
Yes, of course. So Khanjan just said something that, it totally blew my mind as well, is when the students get to the point of I actually had no idea, it takes a lot of work to get to that point. So students, it's normal for their age and for their development to believe that all those thoughts, all those ideas that are coming to their mind are correct. And usually when you ask them to explain something or justify something that they're stating is what's happening to a customer segment or something like that, they'll start the sentence with, it's because I think, it's because I think. So this is where getting out of the building comes to be very important, is to start getting them out of that mindset of, I think this is what's happening. And it's more like, I've seen that this is what's happening with people. I've heard that this is what's happening with people. They get like tunnel vision into the few experiences that they might have had with that customer segment. And sometimes they don't even have them. Like when you're talking about a very specific or advanced or expert level customer segment, like let's say an oncologic doctor, then they most probably have not had any experiences with them. And they're talking a lot of the I think. So when we work with getting out of the building, we start with a little session on teaching them in the classroom how to do an interview and start getting them to feel comfortable asking questions to random people that they'll find when they literally get out of the building. Because they need to understand as well that their first interviews are not going to be that great. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to have problems like establishing rapport. And after a while, they'll get better of it. And therefore, the insights, the information that they obtain will get better. And that's why along the semester, we see that starts to happen.
Great. Thank you, Mariluz. That's really helpful. Jose, anything to add? I know you work so closely with Mariluz, so I don't know if she's covered everything or not.
Well, just one thing to add, not to say it all over again, is that the students sometimes think that their idea is so original. And when they go out of the building, it just pops and they get into the reality of maybe other people have tried and they have failed because this of that or that. So that's one of the reasons why we're trying to say screw ideas. There are other things that are more important, like get out of the building and the methodology, which you can use in many other projects and in other ideas. So ideas, we have a million of them. Some of them will work, others don't. But if you understand processes that work and are able to use it, you will be able to use it on this idea and in the next and in the next. And at some point, the student will go out of the building, will find something that works. So that's one way that we say kind of screw ideas, go with the process.
Awesome. Thank you. We're definitely going to come back to that process piece. So thank you for bringing that up. But first, I would love to tackle something else that's in the manifesto. And when I shared this with Marcom's team to create, they were like, what do you mean by this? So it's this idea of no ideas, but in making and doing. And so Jason and Iain, I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that.
Sure. I think this really follows well from what everybody's been saying. You know, if you're trying to do something innovative or creative or new, you're trying to do something that does not exist. And if it doesn't exist, you can't really ideate it, because ideas and concepts draw on previous ideas and concepts. And I think you really see that when Khanjan was saying, like, you do the 5-minute Google test. Everything you can think already exists. It's already been thought. And so then, just when we talk about innovation, we have to get outside of thinking, outside of ideation. And that leads us into making and doing and experimentally probing and pushing things and being changed by the system we're engaging with. So I think it's even going further than talking to people. We have to work. We have to do things, make things, and think of these things we're making as types of probes. They're not solutions. They're just ways of getting the world to, respond to us and draw us into it. So we go in a journey. We're co-emerging with this idea of, figuring out the right process, as Jose was saying, and Marie-Louise. And so that's really what we mean by saying that there should be no ideas but making. The last part to say about that is that it turns out when you look at human thought, thinking is a form of doing. It's not really just located in our heads. It's extended out into the world. So we're already these other types of creatures than we think we are, and innovation really relies on that and creativity.
Super, thank you. Jason, anything to add?
Yeah, there's a game that Iain and I like to play with our students and in workshops and professionals as well. We call it, Iain will correct me, Spaghettivity. It's a play on creativity and spaghetti. It's a spin-off from the Marshmallow Challenge, which most people are familiar with. We've taken like some of those principles and pushed it quite far. And the typical challenges, right? Like build a tower with spaghetti, get a marshmallow on top, and you've got 20 minutes to do it. Well, we do it in like 3 or 4 minute rounds. And each round we pause at the end and identify what's the commonality, what's everybody building with, how are they constructing their towers. And once we've identified that commonality, we block it, we leave it behind, we negate it, until we get to rounds like 4 and 5, and we get to somewhere totally unique and different that no one would have thought of how to use spaghetti to build a tower with a marshmallow suspended upon the top. And so it's this great exercise that demonstrates that, literally screw ideas, right? Like leave them behind. Don't sit there and try to think of how to get the marshmallow to sit on top. Start to engage and work with it and go through the process. Like Jose said, trust the process, and move to some unique and interesting space you never would have thought of before. And we see this time and time again. We use the 3D printers in our mix lab for this exact same purpose, to help students move away from ideating what could be and using the design CAD software tools and the limitations of the 3D printer to push us into some place of novelty that we'd never think before.
I love that. I want to see a write-up of that exercise because I'm totally going to steal it. So you have to share with me afterwards. So I want to return to the topic that Jose brought up earlier on, and this idea of process. And I know, so Mary-Luz, I would love to call on you a little bit, because I remember when we were talking earlier, you was talking about like the semester constraints and, what that feels like and how that does impact how we think about supporting students and how we can support them.
Yeah. So at the end of these like innovation programs, what we want students is not necessarily to have a product, a solution to something that they have identified. We want them to understand the process, which is what has been mentioned a lot. However, it's very different to go through this process in a real world environment versus the classroom setting, because the classroom setting is set by university standards. So there is a semester in play. You can learn this process in those 4 or 5 months that the semester is running. And there's different stages throughout the process that students must, go through. And in addition to that, there's the grading. So students feel the stress of, I must complete this assignment the way they're asking it by set deadline, and I must do it successfully so that I'll get the points, that I'll get an A. And if something goes wrong, that's where the process doesn't align with the semester, because the student feels afraid to pivot. The student feels afraid to let you know, like, I failed, which is not really failing, but I got an unexpected result from what I was expecting. And what they'll do is they'll have a little lie in their presentations, in their progress meetings. They'll lie about what they actually found because they're afraid that they're going to have to turn back. And if I have to turn back, that makes me fall behind. And as a professor, we'll also feel that stress, but we know that it is part of the process and that you'll be able to catch up. But basically, the student does kind of like a self-sabotage because they're adhering to that standard or traditional method of learning where you have to get the correct answer in order to get all the points, instead of I am going through a learning process and I have to adapt to the information that I'm getting in order to get the accurate result at the end.
That's really helpful. And it's tricky, right? Because you are all in the university environment, right? So I would love to kind of dive into, like, what does that process look like for you and your students? And Soyoung, maybe you could speak a little bit to how do you adapt to those, institution semester constraints?
Yeah, thanks. Marie-Luz, I love what you're saying about how the students' projects, they don't line up perfectly with the academic quarter system or the academic semester system. And so this is part of the reason why we actually lean very heavily on the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem at the University of Washington. There are multiple programs offered through the Innovation Office. In our case, it's the University of Washington Co-Motion Office. There's also programs offered through the School of Business. We also have a Burke Center for Entrepreneurship. And these are all existing programs that we really encourage students to participate in. They don't necessarily follow the academic system timeline. They may sometimes line up, but in some cases, they might have a prototyping challenge that lasts over 2 weeks. So students really have to learn to pivot fast or learn from failing. And so by testing out their projects that they develop in our class system outside of the classroom in these entrepreneurship and innovation programs, they look very closely with leaders in the ecosystem, and they can complement and leverage these existing programs. And they really can test out their processes in real time very quickly. And they realize too that there are metrics that they can gauge their success of their project aside from just a grade or from presentations. So that's really important. So I try to line up my syllabus. I know that we were saying that there's not really a linear process to this, but I try to line up my syllabus so that students can participate in these programs. I look at the deadlines for the applications and so on. At the UW, we have things like the Health Innovation Challenge. We also have students participate in the I-Corps Customer Development Program and so on. And this is, again, another really great way to validate their work and to grow their professional network.
Thank you, Soyoung. That's helpful. Yeah, and I totally get what you're saying about it's not linear, but it kind of has to be linear to some degree, because at some point, there are only so many things you can do, right? So Jose and Mariluz, I wonder if you could speak about how you adapt to what you know now about what's flawed about the university system and how it constrains the way you teach.
So one thing that we continue doing, and it's good, we do a weekend design challenge in which literally we pack what we are going to teach through the whole semester in just one weekend, very dense. But in that way, they can see what they are going to do during the whole semester, and they can see kind of the process of iteration and the whole process at least one way. And one thing that we learned is that on this weekend design challenge, this is kind of a hackathon of entrepreneurship mixed with design thinking. We make them all work on the same problem because it is for all of us to learn about the process. Then after that, then we go into the semester, and then we're able to each of the group work on their unique projects. And it kind of looks like this. We have the weekend design challenge, then we start doing interviews. From those interviews, we analyze that data into insights, and then we brainstorm on it. Then we do a very quick and dirty prototype. We go and do more interviews, and the semester is over. And that's how it looks, more or less, the process in one semester.
Thank you, Jose. Mariluz, anything to add to that?
Yes, definitely the process doesn't end where Jose was talking about, like that's the semester, the new venture design experience part. But then we make contact, like we connect the students of our courses with our UPRM issue network, which is our INE ecosystem. And through there, students start going through other programs, competitions that not only we are also programming on our campus, but we have with collaborators around the island. So this opens the door for them to start entering business competitions, for them to start generating new ideas. And they go through all the phases of pre-incubation, incubation, and acceleration with the help of the different programs the university offers them. So the new venture is just like their kickoff point into entrepreneurship.
Great, that's really helpful. So it's not a single course, right? You're not going to get this work done in a single course. There's the whole ecosystem that you have to think about, which is kind of a tall order, right? If you're just starting out to think about an entire ecosystem. But it sounds like that's the way folks need to be thinking. So related to that, something that came up before, I think Soyoung, you mentioned it, relates to grading, right? And students are very driven by grading, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, right? How do you deal with that? And I would love to hear Jason's perspective on grading, what is essentially a non-linear process.
Yeah, so thank you for asking. It's super wonderful to hear my colleagues speak about process grading and outcomes. And typically that's how we grade at university, right? It's based on the outcome. However, I think it's really antithetical to entrepreneurship and innovation and the artificial constraints the 15-week semester puts upon students. Going back to what Mary Lou said earlier regarding the process and students being afraid or perhaps sometimes dishonest, right? And sharing the interviews and the validation efforts that they've put forth to counteract that. By grading on the effort, we can support a hypothesis not validating, right? Entrepreneurship, these are these classes that we're teaching. We're putting them through the lean startup. They need to validate their hypotheses. Pardon me. They need to validate their hypotheses. And what do we do with the student if we're grading on outcome if they don't validate the hypothesis? It should be rewarded. I always tell my students, I think it takes great courage for them to be honest and share that their hypotheses don't validate. I'm very confident that the students whose hypotheses don't validate learn much more in the program than those that insist that their hypotheses did validate. And that could get to some truth and fact and honesty that Mary Lou was alluding to earlier. And I want to give all my students the benefit of the doubt, but let's be honest, customer interviews are very difficult. They're very hard. And people have great big egos and confirmation bias and all these things we're all familiar with, right? So, and so those that don't validate, if we're grading on outcome, would get an F, right? But that's quite antithetical, right, to everything I just outlined. So I really believe we need to grade on effort and to combat some of that self-sabotage that Mary Lou was suggesting earlier. That's how I start every semester. Every first class of every class I teach, it's an entrepreneurship class I grade based on effort. Learn the process, practice the process in this class. Don't bring your A idea into this class, bring your B idea into this class. Learn how it works, right? And then after this artificial experience where you understand the process from A to Z, because we force you from A to Z, then go and do it out in the real world. And we'll still be here. And that's like our role of a center, right? And lab to support you to achieve that. So that's very much a part of the way, I approach that.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Khanjan, I would love to hear your thoughts about how you go about grading.
So I obviously take a very different approach to this for the simple reason that I refuse to live my life in 15-week increments, right? For me, time never starts, time never ends. It's all about impact. It's all about what you get done over multiple, years, right? So that's a different academic framework itself. And so I would say I would go back to external calibration. And for us, that's a very fundamental value. So is this focus on not considering the students as students, but they are fellows. They are innovators and entrepreneurs ready to take on the world and create value. There's obsessive focus on reality, obsessive focus on value creation. And the role of the faculty mentors is to collaborate with the students, to model processes and conversations, to coordinate with the partners, ensure compliance with the laws and rules and regulations, say, for example, when it comes to IRB processes, and ultimately to get stuff done, right? So assigning grades is a formality that should not take more than like 2 minutes in the semester, is the way I think about grading. And so how do you grade then, right? You still have to assign grades because it's a credit-bearing course. And so the way we do it is two sets of things. The first is we have design reviews, which are essentially 7-minute presentations followed by about 18 minutes of Q&A from a panel of referees, and the faculty themselves are not allowed to be on that panel. So there'll be 10 folks on that panel that have different kinds of subject matter expertise, geographical expertise, because a lot of our work is international. And then they ask the questions and the gloves come off, and it's a very direct, very honest kind of sparring and back and forth that leads to all kinds of new questions and ideas, and then that becomes part of their grade, right? There's student feedback that is also kind of factored in through a very simple mechanism. Students get feedback, which oftentimes is even better, is even more compelling than the feedback that they get from the experts in the room. And the other part of it is when we think of the deliverables, we have teams agree, the students and faculty agree what their deliverables for the semester would be, probably halfway through the semester. But ultimately, the goal would be to advance the venture forward or to advance knowledge. And that new knowledge will advance the venture forward indirectly, right? So what it means is that practically, if students are synthesizing the research and writing papers, they go to peer-reviewed journals. If they're writing funding proposals, they go to review panels. If they're developing products, they are vetted, they are beta tested in location, in country, with real customers and stakeholders. Standard operating procedures go to employees. 90 pages of documentation for regulatory approval goes to the regulatory body. So in essence, zero tolerance for anything that is designed for the professor. Like, I do not want to read stuff. I want to only work on things that go outside of the institution and create value. And that way it is like 100% external calibration. And then that's what the grades are based on, right? If you fail a whole bunch of times, that's okay. Let's write up those failures and let's get an article out. Let's get an opinion piece out on why stuff fails. And somebody can use that as a building block for their own venture, right? Because it's about this collective dream.
I love that. I love what you said about advancing knowledge, right? Because I think that really kind of takes it outside of just advancing this one idea or this one innovation. It's about, continuing on. I love that. Mary-Luz, I wonder if you want to speak a little bit to how you think about grading this process.
Oh, definitely. So we do a combination of what Khanjan and Jason were talking about. So when Jason, for example, mentioned that usually those groups that don't have their hypotheses validated are the ones that learn the most, we have found the same results. Those groups had to pivot, that come to us with the fear usually of, oh my God, I did this wrong. I did not get what we expected, what you expect, or something like that. Those are the groups that tend to end the semester stronger, or when the whole new venture design experience is over, they start literally a new venture using what they have learned in class. Now, the way that we grade to try to walk away from those traditional methods of learning, they have a lot of similarities with what Khanjan does. So we have presentations along the semester. There are also 7-minute presentations where they are literally doing like progress meetings with us. And they're letting us know from the previous 20, 40, 60, whatever interviews they have done, this is what we have learned. Now, us as faculty, Jose and I, we use rubrics so that we make sure that they're implementing all the concepts that we have taught them, that nothing has been left behind. However, when we're actually like assigning points and giving them a grade for what they're doing, we don't look at it as whether it's correct or not correct. We look at it at how they applied what they learned, what we taught them and what they learned, plus what they learned from the interviews. And then when it comes time for feedback, we never comment. We always just ask questions. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? What do you expect is going to happen? What did you expect was going to happen? And just keep pushing questions out there so that they're forced to answer with the justifications that they have from the interviews, or that they start identifying gaps of where they have to like incur more research in order to have a stronger project more towards the end.
I love that Socratic approach. And I can see how with that questioning, how you get the students saying, I think. So yeah, I can see how that comes up so easily. Let me think. So, Khanjan, you touched on this idea of calibrating with external stakeholders and networks. And I'd love to dig into that a little bit more about, what does that look like for others that are actually thinking about bringing in other stakeholders to do this calibration. And I'm going to call on Jason and Iain to maybe jump in and talk a little bit about that.
Sure, I think I did describe it, right? So to give you a specific example, this team that is working on this 2-cent test strip They have more than 20 publications at this point, and we've been contacted by people all over the world that are interested in leveraging our technology and some of our insights, some of the know-how on how do you get this product out to the marketplace, especially in a country where the last mile distribution is the biggest challenge, and the technology innovation is a very small factor in the ultimate success of that venture. So there are these publications that it's all, of course, externally calibrated, right? This team went and got insights from people with all kinds of expertise, from surface chemistry to navigating IRB-like structures in Sierra Leone to getting regulatory approval. So it's really go out and talk to whoever's going to help you advance this forward. And that just, so that larger outcome becomes the driver for the project. And people and the students realize very quickly that I actually don't have any of the answers. I know nothing. And my job is to just keep asking them questions, just the way Marie-Luz described, right? It's a Socratic method. Like, okay, I'm going to help you make good decisions or bad decisions sometimes, and that's part of the game. Sometimes you go down a rabbit hole that you don't come out of, and that also can happen, right? So it's about this extreme reality where they have no option but to go out and talk to whoever and learn from wherever to get things done. And that's what external calibration is.
Great. How do they, I'm just curious, how do they start on that process? Do you give them some pointers, or you just kind of let them loose and say, good luck?
No, we do help them get started. So oftentimes, for example, if you're doing focus groups, like myself or some of the other faculty, we'll first hold just-in-time workshops. So we have pop-up classes on all kinds of topics, or we'll actually, cover students' expenses if they want to go to Coursera or Udemy and learn something, right? Because learning is not my goal at all. Learning is a wonderful byproduct, but that is not my goal. You learn something, good for you. But practically, it's about impact. So what does it look like? Oh, geez, I lost my chain of thought here. Sorry, what was your question again, Victoria?
I think I forgot. Oh, how do you get students started? Because of course they don't start with these networks, right? They don't know any of these people out in the world.
And that's where we take more of an apprenticeship model, and we will have some of those early conversation, and they can learn from folks with more experience how to play that game, and eventually reach a point where they are comfortable doing it by themselves.
Great.
So, yep.
Perfect. And Jason and Iain, how does that work in New Jersey? Like, what happens on your campus?
So yeah, I think what we like to do, very different than Khanjan, right? We're at very different stages. He could be 3 years out, much more sophisticated. We like to set up design forums, communities, bringing in various experts. My cold is getting the better of me today.
I'm sorry. I think we're all getting colds at the moment. Now the masks are coming off, and yeah.
Pardon me. And given the feedback, right? And again, it's about inquiry, it's about challenging, it's about opening their mind. What else is possible? Not focusing on right or wrong or giving answers, but bringing in people that have a much broader perspective than even we have to help elevate and amplify the projects and work that they're doing, to help them see new directions, possibilities, pathways, opportunities to move forward. And then we rely heavily on those engagements with stakeholders to then push them to the next level. And so it's this constant push, discuss, sort of model that can, ideally we would be Khanjan and we'd be doing it for 3 or 5 years on same projects. That would be like a beautiful thing, but not reality in our world as much as we'd like it.
But I think that's good, right? Because I think showing that your approach is different than Khanjan's, but you're all, you're going after the same thing. You're trying to get these students to really get this process figured out. So I think that's great. Iain, anything to add to what Jason said?
Yeah, I would just reiterate that last bit that, universities emerged from religious institutions. They're cloistered. That model still exists. What Khanjan's talking about is like, let's invent the right model to do things. And it wouldn't look like what we have right now and how we teach. And we're stuck in one thing, trying to make another thing. And I think we really need to realize that, all the Band-Aids we're adding to screw ideas can also just repair the wrong boat. we got to figure out that better paradigm. And that would allow, things to emerge in the world, us to emerge with those things in the world, the criteria to emerge, the learning needs to emerge, and we would, follow and support that. And I think, we've been hearing that over the last 45 minutes, right?
Perfect. Thank you. I'm loving the image of the boat with the band-aids all over it. It's probably not super solid, right? I don't think it's very deep ocean worthy at all. Makes me nervous. I want to just go now to the last statement in the manifesto. And it reads, the goal is not a solution. And I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think it's worth coming back around to. So I would love to turn this over to Soyoung first.
Sure. So yeah, the goal is not the solution. This is critical, I think, for all of our programs. Innovation is an open-ended area. There is no right or wrong solution. And so really with us in the EIH program, it's about that process, and students coming out of the program, having nailed that process, can then go on to create a company and recreate this process, or continue on with the same project that they had been working on in our program. And that's really a huge sign of success. But they can go on to work in industry or go to medical school and bring this experience with them. So I'd say the goal is not so much the physical product that came out of this, but it's really about the students carrying on the torch and recreating this process wherever they go. We're set out in these programs to build better engineers, better innovators, entrepreneurs, and so on. And so that is our goal in these programs. The products that come out of these, the success that I see from these solutions in the class is, it's what all the others were talking about. It's the publications, it's the value and the impact that they had on the communities and their stakeholders. It's the way that they had asked questions in a way that probed the clinicians or health professionals to look at their processes differently. And so again, it's not so much the physical product that we're looking for, but really on improving the quality of the students that come out of these programs.
I love that, Soyoung. And it really, in many ways, turns on its head, like many of the ways we think about measuring outcomes, right? So it's like number of ventures created, but this is what you're talking about is just something that's, in my mind, so much more critical and so much more indicative of really positive outcomes. So I will throw this question now to Mariluz and Jose. I'd love to hear your closing thoughts around that. The goal is not a solution.
Yeah, we totally agree on that statement. And like Soyoung said, it's about recreating the process in a different environment. We found that out very, very early on when we started the New Venture Design Experience a few years ago. But something that I wanted to add to what Soyoung was mentioning is the emotional maturity of the students, how it just completely changes from August, when it's usually when we start the program, to December, or even if they go for the second semester, then May. Their maturity levels are so different. They look at any course project or outside professional project very differently. They analyze the situations differently, and they apply different processes that make them a lot more effective. So we agree completely that the solution is not the goal of what they're trying to obtain from these programs. Is more, I don't want to use the word mindset, so I'm going to leave it out. It's more about the learning and how they're going to apply it in a different scenario.
Great, thank you. Jose, anything to add?
So one way we try to summarize it, and this was an aha for us, is that we're building in the new venture design experience project. We are building innovators. We are not building startups. If we look it by the number of startups, we definitely fail. But then if we look at what have the students done after the program, because innovation, it's it's a very wide thing. They can go out to graduate school, they can go out into the startup world, they can go into industry. And we have seen that students, after the new venture design experience, have started to go into opportunities that are non-traditional, and they have started to innovate in things that are not typical for engineers and are not typical for business students. So kind of the learning that we have was another way to say that the goal is not the solution, is that we're building innovators, we're not building startups.
I love that. I love the way that just shifts the focus. Khanjan, anything to add about this concept? Well,
I obviously take a slightly different approach. So I would, I'd go back to Edwin Markham's famous lines of why build these cities glorious if man and builder goes. In vain we build the world unless the builder also grows. And so we are here to do both. We need to build the world. There are real challenges, there are problems, but and we need to find solutions, right? So solutions matter, outcomes matter, but the outcome is not necessarily a startup. Outcomes, like value, is created in so many different ways, and creating value is critical. And that is a real game changer for a lot of our students, especially the ones that don't have that agency, that come from different backgrounds, where that task completion, accomplishing something, seeing their names pop up on VentureWell's website or on Google Scholar is a real game changer. It helps them develop their agency, their self-efficacy, reach this higher level of consciousness, and find their sense of purpose and belonging in the world that leads them to be more intentional about their career pathways, the way Jose pointed out. But for that, there has to be value created as well. And why not create value, right? So learning the process, enjoying the journey, and creating value are not mutually exclusive. So why not do all three?
I love that addition. And Jason and Iain, any other thoughts to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm definitely with Khanjan that there's something about both. I think what's really important to recognize, though, is that, from kindergarten or pre-kindergarten, we have a teaching model that's all about questions and answers. And so that we've built in this model of solution thinking from 4 years old, where people have to think there's an answer and then it's over. And the type of engagement and outcomes that Khanjan's talking about don't look like answers. They look like real world changes, but they change us, they change systems. They're not something that you could put in a pitch. And I think the way we teach entrepreneurship and the way we teach innovation really reinforces implicitly solution thinking. Like you can come up with an idea, maybe you go and talk to a lot of people, but at the end of the semester you pitch something and it's a thing, but you're not doing real engagement. You're not growing and changing in the world. You're doing something really different. And I think the more we can push things into that space and out of solution thinking, the better. So that's why I would say the goal isn't a solution. The goal is like meaningful, transformative engagement.
Love that. Jason, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add that, to complement what everybody else has said, to suggest a solution means it's over, right? But in these courses that we're teaching, they're just the beginning. They're not even the start. What we're teaching is the pre-start. It starts when we uncover something worth following, right? And that's the solution. So it's this misalignment with what a solution truly is in this context.
Terrific. Well, I realized I totally hogged the time because I really wanted to just squeeze all of the juice out of this session. So thank you for indulging me and indulging my questions, everyone. I see there have been some questions answered in the chat. So thank you to all of our panelists for answering those questions as well. We've got 5 more minutes left for the official session. So please pop your questions in there and we can actually just have you unmute and just talk to these fabulous faculty. And then also at the end of the session, we have those 15 minutes of hallway conversations if you want to stick around and get into some of these issues yourself. So with that said, let me have a see if anything additional has been added. So yes, please throw your ideas into or your questions into the chat, or feel free to unmute and just ask away.
Hi, quick question. Thank you all so much for your insights. I wanted to know a little bit more about the different activities and engagement processes you all do in your classes. I'm not a professor. I actually handle extracurricular programs. So I don't have the, the power, the ability to change the mindset of the professor. And so I only have like a few faculty champions who will, you know, tell people to apply to these programs and what have you. So I just wanted to, I don't know what the best way to do this is, but if anyone can drop their, hey, here's an activity you can do maybe with my group of students, or to attract more students. I'm thinking of doing like, I'm trying to be more creative with how I attract students and do this process. So if any of you have ideas, I don't know where to put them, maybe in the chat or in the attendee list. I'm not sure, Victoria, which platform would be best.
Definitely feel free to pop them in the chat. I think that's probably the easiest thing because the chat's open. So yeah, and if you have, you know, I think maybe I'm just looking to see if adding like, it isn't. I was just looking to see if adding files is enabled in the chat, but it's not. But if you have links to specific examples, please throw them in there. And then I don't know if our panelists have some pointers specifically for Regina around this.
I would just say really fast, build parallel institutions that have different time frames and logics that can support students beyond a class, and then fold professors in and fold others in, people from the community.
Thank you, Iain. And it looks like Khanjan is asking Regina, what are you trying to accomplish?
Well, one, I'm trying to accomplish more engagement and excitement with the faculty to send more students my way, which can be challenging, especially in the STEM. They're so busy. I usually have business students, but the business students have the ideas, dare I say, and the engineering students have the know-how. So I have a few challenges, having that excitement and champion through the faculty, and then also trying to get their creative juices flowing, because sometimes they're stuck and they want to participate in a program such as mine because we give them seed funding for development, but they just don't have an idea.
So I'm seeing a few things in the chat.
I mean, if you're trying to get students, work through students, getting faculty is just really difficult, to be honest. Unless you can, you know, show clear relationship between what students are learning in their classroom and then make it really easy for faculty. But most faculty would be very willing to have a student from your office come in for like 2 minutes and talk about a program, talk about an opportunity.
Something that we do at the University of Puerto Rico, the business school has the Business and Economic Development Center, which is a university center funded by the EDA. And we have tons of programs in there, but the center is really good at getting new faculty. They have a radar up of when new faculty from any department has been hired. And even before their first day of teaching, the center has made contact with that new faculty and talked to them about all the opportunities that they have with the Business Economic Development Center, the different programs they can get involved in. They tell them, like, even though we're at the business school and you're in whatever department, this is how you can collaborate. And then we're also open to any ideas that you have. And we make it a very welcoming environment. I say we because I also collaborate with the Business Economic Development Center. So what they do is like they get people involved from all the departments, and little by little, all of these different entrepreneurship programs are being formed that are attracting students from different departments as well. Like faculty and students are being attracted. So now the center, like, for example, it used to be like 3 or 4 undergraduate students working with 2 or 3 faculty members. And now we're like close to having 20 faculty members working and over 45 students that are being hired to work with us. And there's so many ideas just rolling around, and it's fantastic, but it's just getting them early on before other projects have like dragged them in, or before they're being drowned with all of their research projects and things like that. They can do their research projects with the center as well. So it's a win-win.
Thank you. I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second, and then I want to go back to some of the things that I see posted to the chat. I know that we're now going to just post a quick end of session survey. So that's going to pop up on your screen. So please respond to that. We would love, it's 4 questions, take you like a heartbeat to do. And you'll be entered in a prize drawing for a $5 Visa gift card. And so with that said, I want to continue on. And I see Soyoung answered this question in the chat about the big wrap-up event. Soyoung, I wonder if you want to speak to that.
I think it's great for coverage, for bringing in the community, for expanding the community and so on. So at the end of the year of our year-long program, we have about 100 to 200 people come to our main event. Pre-pandemic, 100 to 200. Who knows what it'll look like this year? First time back in person in a while. But even during the pandemic, we'd host these events over Zoom, invite a lot of people. And not only is this a great way to recruit new students, recruit new faculty, recruit new projects, but it's a great opportunity for students to network, exchange business cards, potentially line up opportunities for internships, jobs, and so on. And so I highly encourage having some kind of a wrap-up event. If nothing else, then the students have an opportunity to share what they've been working on over the past year. Great opportunity. I highly encourage it.
I love that. And that kind of gets back into that whole network idea as well that I think you referenced earlier. So I think that's a great suggestion. I see somebody posted this idea of value chain for faculty, not part of tenure. It's a great suggestion. It is tough. It is really tough to bring in other faculty. And Jose, you mentioned about aligning with ABET and how that gets people's attention. So I'm just looking to see if there are other questions. Jahani said one low-hanging fruit could be to approach classes or professors who already have project-based activities. That's a great question, a great suggestion rather. So Mike asked, how do you respond to pushback on this concept from students or faculty? And by this, I think you mean by this idea of screw ideas, right, Mike? Yes.
I could say one thing we do really fast, and that goes back to we play games at the very beginning. So we try not to, have a big theoretical conversation about why ideation is so problematic. We'll play a game that's, highly engaged. And as we unpack that game, the students will generate a new set of rules from it for innovation or engagement. And the thing they will realize themselves is that, the ideation heavy front end of traditional methods don't work. So I think, the more it becomes an activity, that the outcome is something that the students or other faculty are self-generating, the realization is much better than, having an argument or a debate or presenting an alternate viewpoint.
I guess I can also add to that. We have a lot of people pitch ideas to our program. They come to us thinking that we are a program that will build solutions for their problems. We immediately push back. We've never had any pushback on the pushback. We immediately say from the get-go, we try to set the expectation and say, we do not build solutions. And I think one way that we have not had any pushback on this response is from the very beginning, our students go and ask questions, they learn about the unmet need, they do the needs analysis, they, along with the clinician who has pitched that project, realize that there are many different solutions, and part of the process is to understand what doesn't work about some of these different solutions. And in doing so, the people who have pitched these projects, they realize, oh, okay, so maybe this idea that I had coming into this program is just one of many, and these students can actually uncover different solutions that may better address this problem.
I want to quickly second that. I'm very resistant to sponsored projects of any type. Like, we do not do sponsored projects, but if we have if we see opportunities to work together, we absolutely should. But ultimately, our team has the creative control over the direction of the project, because most of the sponsored projects that come in are just very narrow and frankly very boring to me. So there's a different model for that, right? You can go to engineering capstone, and you can give them, and you can have like a pack of like hired mules or whatever the phrase is to like solve that specific technical problem for you. But we're about moonshots. And the larger point here is that every university has so many different kinds of programs, and we need that diversity of programs. We need that smorgasbord of opportunities for our students to pick and choose the kinds of things and to test drive different ways of thinking and being and doing, because you just don't know how each of them are going to be transformative for various students.
Thank you, Khanjan. So I'm seeing in the chat, Jahani brought up this idea of thinking about language when you're talking to different students, different faculty, and it's huge. And, Mariluz was responding that, yeah, that is something you really have to think about when you're reaching out to students, to other faculty and whatnot. And Clint just posted a resource here for folks as well, with principles and the new Lean Startup Guide. Any other questions from folks? Or panelists, if I missed a question in here, please definitely call my attention to it. I've been scanning, but I don't think I have.
One other thing we've started to do is we do, it can be a long or a short workshop where we just deconstruct solution thinking with a kind of systems thinking approach. And it gets the students right at the beginning, or, the fellows, as Khanjan says, to see that when you jump to a solution, you usually make things much worse. And that there has to be some kind of exploration of the system and how the system responds right at the beginning. And so that's another exercise we do to kind of break the solution thinking habit.
It's interesting you said when you jump to a solution, it really confuses things. I just recently was in a workshop and helped facilitated in Tampa, where we had a partnership with Central Florida entrepreneurship communities, and we have a high-tech corridor from Tampa over to Daytona Beach, including Orlando and all that's at the Space Center. And what we did was they took the UN 17 Sustainable Goals, and then they tried to apply one of those, the student teams tried to apply one of those to what they call transfer technology. The NASA space program has come out with just oodles of inventions. The one everyone knows is Velcro, but there's literally hundreds of them. And they're in this book published every year called Transfer Technology. And some people take those and make them commercial products. Well, the students had to put the two together. The goal of one of the 17 sustainable UN goals together with a technology out of NASA. And the one thing that the representative from the high-tech corridor just kept saying over and over is no solutions. If you get near a solution, back off, back off. It's only going to confuse you. It's only going to stop you.
Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all of you for showing up and listening and asking your questions. And yeah, we hope to see you at other sessions. And then next year, I'm hoping we can all get together in person and wear our Screw Ideas t-shirt.
Yes.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thanks, everybody. It's been great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.